Right. Well, thank you for all the interest. I'm really impressed with the number of folks who've turned out for this somewhat technical subject of planning and growth in Talbot County. So my background on this, really, this probably should come across as a disclaimer. I'm an elected member of the Talbot County Council. Been doing that for a little more than 4 years. Before that, for over 9 years, I was a member of the Easton Town Council, and I did get interested in public service because I was interested in first and foremost in land use planning measures. But I've never been a member of the Planning Commission, either the Town Planning Commission or the County Planning Commission. I'm certainly not a planning professional. We have those in both the town and the county. And I'm not an attorney. So there are other perspectives that could shed light on this, and so you'll be hearing from me on what I've been able to gather as an amateur, as you will, in the business of planning and growth. And when we get to discussion, I'll value other perspectives that might be in the room or in the Zoom room. I'm going to start with the vision for Talbot County as it is laid out in the Talbot County Comprehensive Plan. And to be clear, actually, there's actually a vision statement at the beginning of each individual chapter of the Talbot County Comprehensive Plan. But this is the one that is the overall vision for what we are seeking to achieve by doing comprehensive planning in Talbot County. And I've highlighted some clauses in here, promoting a high quality of life, to preserve the rural character, to protect the health, safety, and well-being of its citizens in a resilient community. We recognize, so there's this balance, this quality of life and rural character are two terms that crop up in here. And at the bottom here, in the third bullet point, it notes that to handle the development pressure in Talbot County, we blend state-of-the-art planning tools, strong coordination with and support of our municipalities. This is a county document, so the county with the municipalities, and effective legislation to ensure that the quality of life associated with our rural character is maintained. This plan was adopted in 2016. State law requires the county to have a comprehensive plan and prescribes what the elements are going to be of that comprehensive plan. The towns, the municipalities, are also required to have comprehensive plans, and every now and then they actually mesh. We'll get to that. I've long been a citizen who is interested in preserving rural character, and I've subscribed to the concepts of smart growth since they were really widely promoted by former Maryland Governor Paris Glendenning. Now, rural character. What is it that we mean by rural character? And the comprehensive plan, thankfully, like a lot of these other sorts of documents, does define its terms. And these are the terms in which it lays it out. And some of these might resonate for you: predominance of farm fields and woodlands, visible presence of wildlife, skipping down, open spaces separating functional towns. So that the idea that we have towns, and as you drive into a town, you know that now we are in a town. And when you drive out of the town, you know that you are in the countryside, that there is a distinct difference, a boundary, if you will, between town and country. And it goes on with other aspects here about low-speed roadways, the absence of strip malls or retail outlets, large or prominent names or logos on building exteriors, and large commercial or residential development. The absence of those three things. So this is, yes, this is the vision of the Talbot County Comprehensive Plan, I will say, is something that, although this is articulated in the 2016 comprehensive plan, if you roll back to previous comprehensive plans, at least the last two prior to 2016, you will find similar language. We've long articulated in Talbot County through a widely publicly vetted process. And I will say that comprehensive planning is something that does get widely vetted. The planning officers are really good at engaging and trying to bring out public content for what is our vision and then articulating that in this comprehensive plan, which is then ultimately vetted in a public process. Ultimately, it's developed and adopted or recommended by the Planning Commission, and finally, it's subject to adoption by the political body in the town commissioners, or at least in the council, in the county level, the county council. So, and following this, of course, when we lay out our vision in the comprehensive plan, and following that, as soon as we do that, we turn around and update the code so that we have the laws that actually will help fulfill that vision. And so as we get into that, we'll lay out what are these legal pieces what are these tools that enable us to achieve that vision of rural character that we lay out in our comprehensive plan. Well, the first, of course, is the comprehensive plan itself. That it does carry force of law in that when a proposal for land development, for a change in land use comes before either the town or the county, it gets vetted by the Planning Commission, measured against the language in the comprehensive plan. And they must find compatibility of the proposal with the comprehensive plan, or it does not move forward. It can stop at that level, at the planning commission level. I'm going to talk a little bit about transferable development rights. This is a tool that has not been used much in Talbot County, and I'll explain a little bit why. I'll talk about impact fees, and impact fees aren't so much a tool for managing growth as a tool for how do we deal with growth as it happens, and make sure that growth is paying for itself. I'll talk about the comprehensive water and sewer plan, which seems to get frequently confused with the comprehensive plan because of its unfortunate similarity in name, but it does something rather different. With a process when the municipalities go through annexation for a county zoning waiver to allow the town rezoning to occur. And finally, I'll talk a little bit about our critical area legislation and the growth allocation and the county's role in that. So all of these as tools that we have in our toolbox currently to deal with and manage growth. And I'll start with one of the dozens of maps in our comprehensive plan. This is from a proposed land use planning map from the 2016 comprehensive plan. And it lays out the basic zones. Of course, you really have to zoom in on smaller maps to get the detail on this, but you see the recognizable outline of Talbot County here. And with that, there's this color coding. Around each of the municipalities, you get this, no, it's not going to show up on the screen, that's all right.
I saw it.
You did?
Yes, it's just a little green button off.
Well, I'm not seeing it.
You can walk up to it though, just be careful of the cords.
Around each of the towns, around Easton, Trapp, Oxford, St. Michael's, you will see a green striped area, which is labeled on here for those of you in the back, countryside preservation. It's like a green belt around each municipality. And the inner side of that green belt is identified as ultimate growth boundary for the towns. It doesn't mean that the towns have annexed all the way out to that boundary yet, but that is the room that the towns have to grow. And the area beyond that is intended to be a permanent green belt so that you will have that clear distinction between town and countryside. And we'll get to one of the tools that we use to manage that. For the most part, west of Route 50, you'll see a lot of light green. That's our agricultural zone. Agriculture, of course, is our predominant land use in Talbot County, more acreage in agriculture than in any other use. And part of the vision is to keep farms viable and to keep that open space in that use, because having economically productive farms is the best way of preserving that open space. There are some gray areas on the west side of Route 50. You'll see it particularly in the Miles River Neck area, which is designated the Western Rural Conservation Zone. And that is a zone where back in the 1980s, the county did something that was at the time quite controversial. The county downzoned a lot of land, a lot of rural land, from allowing one house per 5 acres to allowing only one dwelling unit per 20 acres, which meant very controversial in the farming community because it lowered the development value of the land. And if the farmers wanted to borrow against the value of their land to finance their business, it meant that they had less that they could borrow against. Nevertheless, that was part of the vision of Talbot County that did carry the day and continues today. And that in and of itself, that one dwelling unit per 20 acres is probably our most powerful tool for preserving open space. And finally, I'll mention the olive green area, which you will see along all the shorelines around Talbot County, and that's the Chesapeake Bay Critical Area, which is both state regulated but also county regulated. All of that land that is within 1,000 feet of tidewater. And so you've got a couple of layers of regulation to ensure that that most sensitive land, the land where things run off most immediately into our tidal waters, gets that higher degree of protection and management of its land use. Yes.
Some of us are a little confused.
Yes.
Because you said 1,000 feet, I always thought it was 100-foot setback, is that different?
So I got a question about the critical area, about is this 1,000 feet? I thought it was less than that. So the Maryland's critical area law, yes, is the full 1,000 feet from tidewater. But what it does allow is within that 1,000 foot, or within that first 1,000 feet, it really gives priority to the first 200 feet. If that has not been developed, that's pretty much sacrosanct. And you must set back beyond the 200 foot mark. And even between 200 and 300 feet, they want to see minimal development in that and done as sensitively as possible. So really the first 300 feet of that 1,000 feet in the critical area is, it's a higher standard than the full 1,000 feet of critical area. But the state does regulate a full 1,000 feet as measured from, I believe it's the low tide line.
Mean high tide.
Mean high tide, thank you. Good to have some attorneys.
So in homeowners with existing houses, structures that are within the 100-foot area, the county and permitting for changes to that property.
So the question is about for if you've got existing development,
Right.
if you've got a structure that's in that 1,000, it's particularly if it's within that 300 feet, that 300 foot setback. Typically, what you need to do, typically what you may do, is expand off the back or the side of an existing structure, just so long as you don't come closer to the water and decrease the existing setback. But you're getting it. That's getting into some of the weeds here. Yeah.
Literally.
Now, these, back to the first, that green belt around each of these, around each of the municipalities. Here is something remarkable. The county and the municipalities have managed to agree on what those ultimate growth boundaries. This map is not from the county's comprehensive plan, it's from the Easton comprehensive plan. And the same ultimate growth boundary for Easton is in the Easton comprehensive plan as is in the county comprehensive plan, and the same green belt, which is not and never to be annexed into the town, that's county area, colored in green on this map from the Easton comprehensive plan. Now, I mentioned the comprehensive plan is that first tool. Now I'll get into transferable development rights, and a tool that we really have not used in this county very much. We do have a program in place, as do a lot of other counties. The Maryland permits transferable development rights. The principle here is that if I own a parcel, and let's say it's a parcel in this green belt, I'm entitled to, let's say it's the underlying, my underlying development rights is one house per 20 acres. And as it is there, and let's say I own a 100 acre field or forest in that zone, in that countryside preservation zone. I'm entitled to build those lots there. But let's say I want to sell, I don't want to actually develop, I want to sell the rights for that development, have my 100 acres permanently preserved, and allow that density to go to somebody else's land so that they can get a higher density. The total effect on the county is this, it's the same net effect. We're going to get the same number of houses, whether I develop what is mine by right, or if I sell those rights and they are concentrated into a smaller area elsewhere. Now, here we have, in this countryside preservation zone, we can transfer development rights out of this zone. If you own land in that green belt, you may sell your rights, but you cannot buy rights into that zone. So the receiving areas for those development rights cannot be in that green belt. They must be elsewhere. This is not easy, and that's probably why this tool has not been used very much. And there are, I believe, 770 acres where this has been done in Talbot County. But the questions are, what are the receiving areas? There might be a push or a carrot to take development rights out of this green belt, but is there a draw elsewhere? Is there a market to bring those development rights into another area? And ideally, where you move those development rights to are areas where you already have existing infrastructure, water and sewer, road networks, existing infrastructure. And where do we have that? Well, largely, it's in the municipalities. And so really, to make this effective, ideally what we might like to do is have an interjurisdictional agreement with one or more of the municipalities so that those rights can be transferred out of that green belt and into the municipality at some higher density. That's a detail that we don't yet have worked out. The cluster is one. The idea that if you have, again, that 100 acre lot, you're entitled to the five dwelling units. Rather than, traditionally you could cut that up into 5 20 acre lots and put one dwelling unit on each. Well, that kind of sprawls across the landscape a bit. And so county code now encourages actually requires clustering to say that, no, instead of that, why don't you put 4 of your dwelling units on 2-acre lots, cluster them together, and keep all of the rest permanently unbroken. That's recorded, and we keep all the rest of that as open space permanently. It's a powerful tool. TDRs were one thing that helped encourage clustering, but now we've hardwired that into the code. So it means that there's less of a carrot to go pursuing a transferable development right. You could also potentially transfer them into one of the existing villages. I'm showing here the map of Royal Oak, the Royal Oak Village. But again, the county is already zoned for higher densities. And there may not be that much to be gained by using a transferable development right to get higher densities in the village. And it may not match the vision for that village to put higher densities there either. So again, transferable development rights, it's a tool in the toolbox, but one that really hasn't been put into effect to any great extent in Talbot County. Now, I'm going to mention impact fees. As I said up the front, this is not really a tool to manage growth in that it does not channel growth to a different place. Impact fees rather help pay for growth when it takes place. Once it is approved, and at the time that a developer, a builder is obtaining a building permit, you're obligated to pay these impact fees. If you are building a residence, for each dwelling unit, you will pay a share of everything that dwelling unit will need to provide services to you, to provide services to the people who are living in that dwelling unit. Well, we're looking at an expansion of the St. Michael's Library. And so there's a library aspect to impact fees. We are trying to acquire more parkland, provide recreational opportunities to residents. And so there's a parks and recreation aspect to develop the recreational facilities in our parks, such as the new gymnasium that is now approved in the budget for this coming year for the adjacent to the Talbot County Community Center. I'll use the official names here. The schools, when we build dwelling units, we might get school students. And so there's an aspect of that. We just spent $30 million of county funds, $50 million overall, if you throw in the state funds, to build a new Easton Elementary School. And so a piece of impact fees goes to schools, to community college, that would be Chesapeake College, to general government, that would be paying for, say, the new sheriff's office that we have to build, and for transportation, roads, intersections. That's not paying for your state highways. That's not paying for intersection improvements to, say, Route 50, or the Oxford Road, or the St. Michael's Road all the way down to Tillman. That's paying for county roads. Your state taxes pay for county roads.
Excuse me, do the impact fees go to the county or to the municipality?
So both. The answer is both. If you're outside of the municipality, you will pay this $9,100 fee for each dwelling unit in the county. But let's say you're inside of Easton. Well, we're going to take off some of, Easton's paying for the roads there. So we're going to take off some of the transportation part of this fee. We're going to take off some bits and pieces. You're still, the county pays for schools, so that full fee is in there. So inside of Easton, or inside of any of the other municipalities, that impact fee from the county is reduced. But then if you go to the right column, you will pay Easton's impact fees, or St. Michael's impact fees, or Trapp's impact fees.
Is that the fee a developer is paying when they're building?
That is the fee that is paid by the developer or by the builder at the time, or if you're building your own, at the time you're obtaining a building permit. It's an upfront fee for that. So again, it's not really, yes, if you think that making development more expensive is development control tool. I guess you could think of it that way. But really, this is just making sure that development is paying for its own costs and that those costs for the library, for transportation, for schools, don't get socialized among the rest of the taxpayers who are already paying for this. And we're not subsidizing development in this way. Development ought to pay its own fair share.
My understanding, you said something about some of these fees go back to the towns.
If the town has an impact fee schedule, the town collects its own impact fee. The county impact fees go to the county.
Correct.
And if the town has an impact fee schedule, those fees get collected directly by the town. And usually the way these things work is that we calculate impact fees on things that we've already paid for. And so like the Easton Elementary School actually isn't even built into the fee yet. We're doing a new impact fee study on the county level right now so that we will build that in. And then the impact fees essentially pay for the bonds that we use to pay for this school expansion or the transportation or the library or anything else.
So essentially what you're saying, like with your, what you have up front there. So if somebody were to build a house in the town of Easton, they're paying the $7,800 plus the $3,400 for the town of Easton.
Correct. You add those two fees together. You'll pay separate checks, one to the county, one to the town, but you'll have to pay both of those.
So other municipalities, like say Michael's or Trapp or Queen Anne or whoever, they need to have their own impact fees.
Each municipality needs to work out what they've spent on infrastructure, on the new town hall or the new street repaving, rebuilding project or anything like that. Anything that you can build into a capital project that needs to be shared out among all the users.
Did the town of Trapp have impact fees? Or did any of these ever come out, or were they ever in the resolution of approval by the county?
Let me, you're getting, I got a specific question about impact fees and Trapp, about which I am not an expert, but we'll save that to the end. We probably have some people in the room who are more expert than I am on
But
that.
I also wonder if, I know the county basically has control with sewer and water. That way,
Hold that thought. I'm getting to it. I
Okay.
promise.
okay,
Please, people, would you please hold your questions so we can get through this day? Thank you.
So, speaking of water and sewer, we get to this next tool, which is the county's comprehensive water and sewer plan. And we're actually in the process of, the Talbot County is in the process of updating its comprehensive water and sewer plan. It's now with our Public Works Advisory Board, and this is a two-step process. We are overdue to update our comprehensive water and sewer plan because we've done it, get this, in 2002. And we've been dragging our feet. We are the last county to, nobody else has one that is this far out of date. I think the next oldest comprehensive water and sewer plan in the state is about 10 or 12 years old, but we're getting there. We're doing it. We're doing it this year. We're underway. And just to make sure we were going to do it, the Maryland Department of the Environment, the state agency that oversees this, gave us a little kick in the seat of the pants to move us along. Now, the comprehensive water and sewer plan deals with shared and public water systems. Now, there'll be a water system for the town of Easton, but there's also a water system, there's actually two water systems, private water systems in the village of Claiborne, so that not everybody in Claiborne has to have their own well. It's not a municipal, they're private systems. But if they are mapped out in the comprehensive water and sewer plan. Similarly, sewer systems, most of these are public. And here is one of our newest sewer systems mapped out, or sewer designated areas mapped out, which is at Ferry Point. Ferry Point is where Route 50 crosses the Choptank River. or just before it crosses the Choptank River. And in this map of Ferry Point, you will see a bright green area that is labeled S1, or Sewer 1, for immediate eligibility for connection to a sewer system. Well, that's kind of curious. These are 5 commercial properties along Route 50 that are eligible for immediate connection. Only here's the catch. There's no sewer system there. But they needed to get this designation in order to pursue funding to get to build a sewer system there. So they are in the process of trying to figure out how to pay for this. It's not cheap, but none of those businesses can expand on their existing septic systems, which is why they have a financial incentive to want to round up the funds to create a new sewer system. Now, adjacent to that, you'll see more of a lighter green area labeled S2, and that's a residential area. And the residents there said, we're not ready to buy into that. In fact, some of these residents had recently upgraded their septic systems. This is going to be expensive. So we left that in a lower designation, S2, which is said to be expected to be eligible within 3 to 5 years. It will require a legislative act to change that to S1 to become immediately eligible for sewer. And so, because it requires that legislative act, which starts with our Public Works Advisory Board making a recommendation, goes to our Planning Commission, the Planning Commission has to say, yes, this is putting sewer in this area and facilitating the development that it will facilitate, meets the comprehensive plan. It is compatible with the project is compatible with the vision laid out in the comprehensive plan. And so without that legislative act, you effectively have a growth control tool with the comprehensive water and sewer plan. Now, there are some attorneys who will tell me that the state never intended the comprehensive water and sewer plan to be a growth management tool. Municipalities may develop their own comprehensive water and sewer plan. That's an elective act. Municipalities may do that. The county must, and the county's plan must incorporate the municipality's subsidiary plans. And so if this Ferry Point is not inside a municipality, it is unincorporated area. And so it is simply up to the county what here gets designated for immediate eligibility for sewer service. Inside of a municipality, the municipality needs to start by asking for sewer to be extended to an area. And then it goes through that same process at the county level. Public Works Advisory Board makes a recommendation. Yes, that's technically feasible. Planning Commission has to make a determination. Yes, this is compatible with the county's comprehensive plan. And then finally, it's a legislative act by the council. Found consistent, there's the language, not compatible, found consistent with the comprehensive plan. So there's the fourth tool, the comprehensive water and sewer plan. Now, here's another one, which is municipalities really have the authority to annex land. Now, in Maryland, you really don't do hostile annexations. Municipalities must have the consent of a majority of the property owners in an area to be annexed in order for it to be, essentially the property owners need to apply to be annexed. And frankly, we charge them, the municipalities charge them to do that. Easton has done a couple of annexations recently. One of them down at Easton Point, which you'll see in that in the dark purple. Actually, that's limited industrial land. That's not actually some of those properties were part of the recent annexation request by Easton. Now, when it comes into the town of Easton, some of this land, even though it's been developed, Easton Point has been developed for decades, over a century. several centuries. Even though this land is already developed, it has not been annexed into the town, and so it's been under county zoning. And so as it gets annexed into the town, well, the town's got its own completely separate rule book for zoning, and the town gets to apply its own zone. It will not enforce county zoning on a town parcel, or it sure doesn't want to. So, in the process of annexation, the town will annex by resolution, and then it will, by ordinance, impose a zoning designation on this new land. And at Easton Point, that zoning designation is going to be MXW, mixed use waterfront. Mixed use meaning both residential and commercial, a variety of uses within the same parcels. And Easton developed a vision for Easton Point and developed this mixed use waterfront zoning specifically for Easton Point, with the town planning commission working in concert with the county planning commission. And so there was a discussion and a degree of agreement before the county adopted this. And so in the one annexation that's taken place since then, state law says that after the town annexes, the county may impose a 5-year hold on its zoning. In other words, it would remain under county zoning for 5 years. Well, with county zoning, you probably wouldn't get the additional development rights that are the whole reason for a developer to bring the parcel into the town. Without that waiver, that would be a disincentive to develop. They need the concurrence of the county. And so this process is made for the county and the towns to come to some agreement and work together so that the county ultimately signs off on the 5-year zoning waiver. We've had one that's taken place already at Easton Point. There's another one that's working its way through that process right now. There was some question down at St. Michael's of some land on the edge of town by Boundary Lane, just a few acres that the town might annex. If that had happened, they would have had to come to the county for the county to sign off. Instead, the town actually turned down that annexation, so it won't come to the county if that land remains in the county. Easton Point is really a wonderful example of how this process is supposed to work. Easton went through this visioning exercise, which you see here, that laid out what Easton Point could look like. And with lower-rise units along the waterfront, stepped back, higher-rise in the back, a mix of commercial and residential, and went through this public visioning process. And then the MXW zone was adopted from that visioning. How do we make it easy so that the right thing to do is also the easy thing to do in following the new zoning code? This is exactly how this process is intended to work. It has been working at Easton Point. And I'll get to our final tool in our toolbox now, which is the Chesapeake Bay Critical Area Growth Allocation. And I'm putting up a map of a development proposal. This is a development that has not occurred yet, but is working its way through the process, and this is in the upper right corner, the Oxford Road. This is the Poplar Hill farm or Poplar Hill development that lies along both Oxford Road on that upper right, and along the lower part of the slide is the Easton Parkway. So it bounds both of those. In fact, the slice out of here, down here against the Parkway and Tristan Drive, is where the Jewish temple is, to orient you. So this parcel is in Easton. It has been annexed into Easton for decades. And so the 5-year zoning waiver, the county can only put up to a 5-year hold on that, is not in effect. Whatever the town wants to zone this the town will zone it. The town gets to make that decision all on its own. There's no county role in that. But on this map, there's a dashed line that runs through it. And it really kind of disappears through the development, but you can see it continuing up in this area up here. That dashed line is the critical area, the Chesapeake Bay critical area. It is set back. There is a tidal waterway here. It is the paper mill branch or the South Fork of the Tread Avenue River. And so about half of this parcel lies within the Chesapeake Bay critical area. And when the critical area law was passed in the 1980s, actually they amended it. So in 1989, the complaint was, but we are going to still need to develop more waterfront that is now undeveloped. And we need a little bit of an escape valve. And so in 1989, the state allocated to each county and to each municipality that lay within the critical area a proportion of critical area growth allocation, areas that are now undeveloped, that would be allowed to be developed. A finite amount of acreage proportional to the amount of critical area in each of these jurisdictions. Easton, because it is on the waterfront, on the upper reaches of the Tread Avenue River, Tidewater, got some of its growth allocation, and it used its growth allocation in two past residential developments, one Cook's Hope, and two Easton Village. And so now, in order to get a growth allocation for the Poplar Hill development, Easton will have to come to the county. And in fact, there was a recent meeting, public meeting over at the Avalon Theater, to discuss exactly this matter, this application. Should that critical area growth allocation be allowed for or be granted for this parcel? The county's growth allocation, the town's was finite and it is used up. The county's growth allocation in the critical area is only about 600 acres. It too is finite. And so we still have to, I'm a historian. And so I have, my vision is always fixed like a rower, firmly in the past and where we've already been. And I can't prognosticate about what the future looks like. But nevertheless, understand that as this works through, that is why the county has a seat at the table with this particular project, is because of the critical area growth allocation and specifically the town of Easton's need to come to the county for additional growth allocation. Now, I'm going to mention two other tools here that we do not have in our toolkit. And one of them has gotten some public discussion lately, and that is this adequate public facilities ordinance. There are adequate public facilities ordinances in a number of jurisdictions in Maryland, including our neighbor, Queen Anne's County. These can exist in municipalities, they can exist in counties. And an adequate public facilities ordinance sets up a series of tests for the adequacy of public water infrastructure, public sewer infrastructure, road intersections, and public schools. At least those are the areas that are designated in Queen Anne's County's AFPO, Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance. And if each of these has adequate capacity, our sewer plant can accommodate more dwelling units. Our water system has enough gallon capacity to provide the addition. We have the seats, the classrooms in the schools to support these additional dwelling units that a developer is coming to us for. If we check all these boxes, you get the blessing to proceed. If not, then it becomes incumbent on the developer to provide a mitigation plan. Maybe the county has plans to expand that school. By the time we build these houses, that school will be expanded. We'll have that. Here's our mitigation plan. Or it may be that those plans are not on the books. And so the developer will make a contribution to pay for that infrastructure that is lacking. In Queen Anne's County, the question about adequate public facilities has been coming up with sewer capacity down on, I think it's Bat's Neck, on part of Kent Island, south on Route 8, south of Stevensville. So it is a tool to say, we need to make sure that we are going to have this capacity before you get your approvals in order to proceed on building. Now, one of the questions I've heard raised is, can an adequate public facilities ordinance for the county actually work if the development is being driven by the municipalities? And that's a valid question, but the good news is at least one of our municipalities, and that is candidates for the Easton election tomorrow. If you're an Easton resident, please go out and vote. At least one of several of the candidates are also talking about Easton creating its own adequate public facilities ordinance. So if the county and the town are working in tandem, we should be able to talk to each other and work together, right? Occasionally it actually works. We can have a development tool that will ensure that all that infrastructure is in place. Because of course the town can approve new development. The town doesn't pay for schools. Town pays for roads, town pays for water, town pays for sewer, but the county pays for schools. And so is school capacity being taken into account in the town's adequate public facilities ordinance? That's a discussion that we have yet to have, but that I hope that we will have with the town of Easton as we develop adequate public facilities ordinances in tandem. I say that we will do this. It is my hope that we will get to do this. And finally, I put down here with a question mark, form-based codes, because I've been approached about form-based codes as a development management tool. Form-based codes are the idea that the way we zone right now is that we have zones that are for single-family residences, and zones that are for multiple-family residences, and zones that are for limited industrial, and zones that are for commercial development. And we separate all these functions, and we draw them out in pretty colors on our zoning maps. Form-based codes takes a different approach, and some zones allow multiple uses, like mixed-use waterfront. Combine these functions in one place. Form-based code says, I don't care what you do in that building. Just make the new building that you build look like all the other buildings around it. The same size, the same height, the same setback, the same style, and then do what you will with it. And then the development is simply, you've got continuity with what is next door. Now, here's the thing. This has worked in some places. All of the places where it has worked are urban. It has never been really attempted in a rural area because there isn't necessarily adjacency of structures. We want open spaces. We don't want to put structures everywhere. And so I'm of the opinion, at this juncture at least, that form-based codes are not an appropriate growth management tool for Talbot County with the vision that we have for our county. Now, I'm presuming that we may have a few questions, so I'll pause.
Is there anything?
No.
So let's start with chat.
I was just gonna say, so I do have a question in the chat. First one says, do impact fees account for the yearly maintenance of per child costs for the number of years the county might, well, let me expand, this is tiny. It's cutting off. Okay, it says, do impact fees account for the yearly maintenance of child costs for the number of years that the county might encounter for a student attending the public school?
So the answer is no. The impact fees do not look at the cost per student. Impact fees are not about operating costs for the county. They're not about our annual, regular year in and year out costs. They are about capital costs. They are about infrastructure. And so what will be in the impact fees is not how much we're spending per student on teachers and buses and everything else that goes into running a school. What's in there is the cost of building the school, of building the classroom space, of providing that adequate space. It's only the capital cost that is in the impact fee. Likewise, when you talk about water and sewer, it is not the cost of running those systems, of the personnel, the testing and so forth that goes into those. It is the capital cost of building them. So it is, impact fees are all about capital costs, not about our annual operating costs for that infrastructure.
That's it.
Take one from here, Mr.
So
Flower.
that's where this FPO takes over from the impact fees.
So, yes, the question is about, that's where APFOs or adequate public facility ordinances take over. So impact fees don't actually decide whether or not a development can proceed. They simply pay for that once it has proceeded. The adequate public facilities ordinance is to say, we want to make sure there's a plan in place already before you put a shovel in the ground. And so impact fees and an adequate public facilities ordinance can work in tandem with each other as to pay for the costs of development and to make sure that it is there when it is needed. Question in the back.
Yes, that's a 2016 comp plan. Where are we going now? I thought they had to be updated every so many years
So
as required by the state.
the question is about how often comprehensive plans are updated, and the county's comprehensive plan, as I mentioned, is 2016. The state used to require us to do it every 7 years, and a lot of jurisdictions were getting over to 8 and 9 years and stretching that because it's a very intensive cycle. We bring in outside consultants. Not too many of our local jurisdictions have the in-house capacity to do this, to redevelop a comprehensive plan. So we bring in outside consultants who specialize in doing these visioning sessions and all the public engagement. And so the state law now requires us to do comprehensive planning every 10 years. And so the county's comprehensive plan is due up in 2026. Easton's comprehensive plan, which was done in 2010,
It's a little.
that's more than 10 years. And they are doing it right now. And many of you probably have been engaged in that public process of Easton's comprehensive plan. So Easton, presumably sometime during the year 2023, will have an updated comprehensive plan. We are not on the same cycles. Each jurisdiction is on its own 10-year cycle. Yes, Karen?
With respect to the APFO, I heard you say that Queen Anne's has one and other counties have one, but we don't, Talbot County.
The question is about who has an adequate public facilities ordinance. And yes, Talbot County does not yet have an AFPO. I don't remember the full list of counties. The closest one to us that does have one in effect is Queen Anne's County.
Are we contemplating having one here in
I
Talbot?
am contemplating having one. And others. I'm not the lone voice in that. There are others who I think see the desirability of doing this.
I have a question. Pardon me. It's kind of theoretical. The town has comprehensive plan, the county does. The town can do what it wants, except the county controls the water sewer. Right? Is that right?
Well, it is the case that when we develop, in addition to doing public meetings in the process of developing our comprehensive plans, the question is, aren't municipalities and counties just acting independently of one another in developing their respective comprehensive plans? And the truth is that while the ultimate decision, yes, is up to that jurisdiction, whichever jurisdiction it is, we do talk to each other, and the state requires us to talk to each other. The state not only requires us to talk to each other, and so that the county's comprehensive plan draft will go to each of the municipalities And each of those municipalities will probably hand this off to their planning commission and say, tell us something about this, look at this, and give us an opinion on it, and give us comments to hand back to the county for what really should be the way the comprehensive plan should impact our community and its immediate environs. Likewise, when one of the municipalities develops its comprehensive plan, its draft plan goes to the county staff and to the county planning commission for comment. State agencies, lots of people get input, and that's really why these comprehensive plans are such good documents. They're so well vetted internally by the public, by the local government's own processes, by state agencies, and by neighboring and overlapping jurisdictions. So yes, there's a decision, and the evidence of that there is this interjurisdictional cooperation is with that countryside preservation zone, that green belt around each of the municipalities where we've talked to each other and we've put the same ultimate growth boundary and the same green belt in our respective comprehensive plans. So there is evidence on paper that this process does work.
What's the process for amending the comp plan?
Right. So 10 years is a long time, and visions can change, and needs can change, and the way comprehensive plans may want to change are either by changing the intended land use for a particular piece of land, or by changing the code, the underlying rules by which we implement this vision laid out in the comprehensive plan. And it is a legislative process like we do anything else. So we are allowed to do piecemeal amendments. It usually comes from an outside applicant. It's usually not generated by the local government jurisdiction. An outside applicant says, I want to do this differently. And it goes to the council. We refer to the planning commission. The staff works on it and works its way back up with recommendations from the planning commission. And ultimately, it's a legislative act by the council, a fresh ordinance.
It's sort of a follow-up on the adequate public facilities plan. So if we don't have one, that means that you all don't factor those things into decisions for permitting developments.
So the question is, in the absence of an adequate public facilities ordinance, we don't have this tool to take into consideration, say, school classrooms. And yes, that is true. We can allow a developer, we don't have the tool to say no to a developer because we don't have a plan to provide school classrooms for you. Because we don't have a plan to provide water and sewer for you, because we don't have a plan. Usually, actually, transportation is a different matter. Usually they can be made to pay for as part of the development agreement, road intersection improvements. But no, we don't have that tool in our tool chest right now. So that does feel like a missing piece, a missing tool that we ought to have. Justin, do we have others online?
I do not believe so.
Yeah. Yeah.
A question about impact fees. My background is in municipal management, and I have some familiarity with some of this. I thought that impact fees were challenged by developers years ago, and that municipalities were not allowed to mandate that they pay impact fees calculated as you presented them tonight. Now, I'm away from it for a few years, so maybe things have changed. What's the status of impact fees? Can the developer determine to not pay them?
I don't believe so,
Okay.
at least not in Maryland. I know, and this is from my experience on the Easton Town Council, I remember getting a number of complaints about impact fees. You know, can't we waive those fees for this nonprofit organization that is going to do something of great benefit to our community? There might be a compelling case. Well,
No.
The truth of the matter is that the infrastructure still needs to be paid for in some way. And it's been suggested that, well, maybe the municipality needs to come up with its own cash. It's essentially a contribution to that organization or that development. But but I know that at Easton, at the very least, is enforcing impact fees. And in fact, this year is redeveloping its schedule of impact fees so that more recent projects that Easton has put into capital projects that Easton has developed and that Easton is now paying for with its annual debt payments will now get covered. A percentage of those will now get covered by the, I'm going to say increase. I don't know that in fact that they're going up, but these things tend not to go down.
Thank you.
Yes.
May I just piggyback on that question? I have no perspective on this, but it didn't seem like $7,900 is a lot of money for a single-family impact fee.
Well, the question is, if $7,900 doesn't sound like a big fee for one dwelling unit. And I will say that fee that I showed is for a single-family detached dwelling. It's actually a lower fee if you are building multifamily unit. It's a lower fee per unit. I don't know why, but it is. And that's true both on the county level and on the town level. Maybe because single-family detached houses are more spread out, you need to pay more in transportation, more a share of the roads infrastructure or something like that. At any rate, they do scale those fees differently. Is that expensive or is it not? It's a question of your perspective on this and particularly how sharp a pencil you're using to try to make your numbers work for your new development. And of course, it's easy to pick out impact fees as a whipping boy for why we can't afford to build the affordable housing that you would have us build.
The growth allocation in critical areas, back to that with the county. I think you mentioned 600 acres. Is that what the county has left? Or they've already used some, or was that their total allocation?
The question is about how much growth allocation the county has left with that 600 acres. I do not know what our original allocation was, nor how much has been used up since then. I've been given that approximation recently for what we have moving forward, but I don't have the history on that. I'm sorry. In the back.
Okay, with the comprehensive plan, obviously the development, whatever development is going on has to be within the parameters of that comprehensive plan. And if the developer wants to go out of that, as you indicated, they would have to ask for a waiver or something like that. What kind of enforcement mechanisms do we have or should we have if they don't ask for a waiver and just go ahead and do it anyway?
Well, so the question is about the enforceability of the provisions in the comprehensive plan. So if you are simply playing by the existing rule book, I'm entitled to put this many dwelling units on this much acreage. I'm allowed to put these particular uses as I'm now zoned. All you need to do is go in and get your site plan approval and your building permit ultimately. Obviously, this comes in, the comprehensive plan comes in if you're looking for some sort of change of departure. I want you put some other use or some more intensive use of this parcel than my existing zoning calls for. And usually what that is, if it is a zoning change, that the bar is actually very high to get a zoning change. In between comprehensive plans, you basically need to demonstrate that there's either been a change, the way this neighborhood is developed has changed, and my property hasn't caught up, or there was a mistake. When this was mapped back in 2016, a mistake was made, and what I'm asking for is merely a correction. That's a pretty high bar. That's not to say that you can't get more intensive uses, and when a developer comes in for an amendment to the comprehensive plan, then the comprehensive plan comes into play about, is the vision laid out here consistent with the comprehensive plan? You can't get your building permits. You can't get your permissions to proceed. And do people build without permits? Yes, it does take place, but you can get yourself in legal jeopardy by doing that. And expensively have to undo what you've done. So, if you're, the approvals, the reviews come first before you're getting your permits to proceed. There are, I mean, I think both the municipalities and the towns have the teeth to be able to enforce their zoning codes and their visions for the communities. Anything else online?
I just want to make a statement. It's the most fascinating presentation. And it now gives me an idea of why there's so many law offices clustered around.
Statement about how complex this is and why there's so many law offices. And yes, not only that, but we have attorneys here that specialize in land use law. And some who are quite good at this, and you would be well advised if you're going to be going about one of these changes in engaging them. Don't, kids, don't do this at home.
So I have one person saying, thank you for having the Zoom online access tonight for all of us living outside the Talbot County area. There's a strong interest, possibly living on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, we'll continue to follow. The next, that was really more of a comment. And then the next thing says, where developers requesting a discretionary change, like a planned use development or a supplemental critical area growth allocation, can't the county or town council consider the cost of future infrastructure even without an APFO?
Let me get to the first comment first, which is looking at this as a way of thinking about relocating to the Eastern Shore. And I am just thrilled, head over heels, that somebody would be looking at Talbot County and thinking this deeply about frankly, our vision for Talbot County, your vision for Talbot County, because many of you have had input into this process in shaping this vision, is exactly what makes this place so special. It is exactly what lures so many people to live here. It is what we particularly love about this place and that has drawn us here. If you came here from somewhere else, or maybe it is even what has kept you here, if this is where you started. So thank you. And let me get to the actual question there, which is about the AFPO.
It says, can't the county or town council consider the cost of future infrastructure even without an APFO?
So it was done in the context of a critical area growth allocation and of a planned unit development. So when you get to, so both of those, a planned unit development is basically a project where a developer comes in and says, there really is, you want commercial zoning on this place, but I want to build a mall. And you the building shapes and so forth, you can't do that under your zoning code. And so I'm going to come in with a planned unit development, and it's going to be an overlay plan for this parcel of land. And it will spell out all the things that I'm going to do, will do, must infrastructure I must build, all the amenities I must provide, and all the things that I may not do. It spells out a special, and then the approval of that becomes a special legislative act by either the town commission or the county council, wherever it lies. You will see this. You will see a number of these in the town of Easton. Some residential developments get configured in a way that they're done with a planned unit development. In fact, I believe The estates at Gannon Farm is one, because it has things like commercial property in what would otherwise be a residential zone. And so they did it using this planned unit development tool. The area where the Target is, that commercial development, that's a planned unit development. Most frankly, most of the shopping centers are. Easton Village, so we've got, Easton has used that particular mechanism a lot. So when you are, a critical areas growth allocation or planned unit development is an elective act. You can't, a developer can't just come in and say, I've checked these boxes, now give me my permit.
They should try to.
It's an elective act of the elected body. And so, yes, the elected body absolutely has leverage to take things into consideration. In the end, it will come up with a series of findings of fact that either because of all these conditions, our concerns have been met or they have not been met. And it gets either an upvote or a downvote. But there's, with anything like that, there's room to negotiate. And so you could potentially take these other things into consideration. You might get some howls from the developer's attorney that you're throwing some things into the mix that really don't belong there, that aren't the proper province of this. But once it becomes an elective act like that, not mandated on the local jurisdiction, yeah, we certainly have room to do that. But not every project has such a need. And so an adequate public facilities ordinance would cover us in a lot of cases where you're simply playing within the existing rule book. A routine subdivision that is following all the existing densities and usages that are allowed under the existing zoning code. So there I believe still is a place for that.
So what happens when a township wants to do something and the county says it's not consistent with what the county's vision is?
So I guess so the question is about what if the town wants to do something that is not that the county finds incompatible. Well, it has to be an area where the county actually has some jurisdiction. So it would have to be a new annexation, or it would have to be an area that requires water and sewer extension. So that's where the comprehensive water and sewer plan comes into play. Or it would have to be a critical areas growth allocation. It would have to be one of those where the county has some sort of decision-making role. If you're playing in a long annexed area of the town that already has water and sewer designation that is outside of the critical area, the town at that point can do what it will. But then again, if let's say Easton is looking to redevelop some area along the rail trail and is looking to load in much higher densities there, high rises, whatever it be, that land has long been in the town. It is outside of the critical area. It hasn't been it doesn't need any of it. It's got water and sewer. The town will do what it will do to redevelop those areas. The county would have no voice, no say in that. But then part of the vision of the comprehensive plan is to say that we have thriving municipalities, and that municipalities that grow inward, that are redeveloping existing lands, well, that's exactly where we want development, is redeveloping existing lands rather than sprawling out across the landscape. So in a way, that type of thing is really encouraged by the vision of the comprehensive plan.
One thing that strikes me in all of this is that the rural quality of life here is no accident. My question is, how long has it taken to put all this together? I think there've been 5 10-year plans, is that right? I mean, it's like 50 years of putting this complex
Yeah,
system
how,
together?
the question is how did, from Mr. Bruce, is about how did we get to this juncture where we have this articulate vision of this rural character that we treasure and that we're preserving. Comprehensive plans go back in both the municipalities and the county, I think, to the 1970s. So yes, we're at about the 50-year threshold. The concept of zoning goes back in Talbot County to the 1950s. So the idea that we've been on a long path to get to this vision. And one thing that I find remarkable about Talbot County is this long-standing public support for open space preservation, for preservation of rural character, that does set us apart from surrounding jurisdictions. Talbot County has been very fortunate. One, its distance from the Bay Bridge, and two, in its relative economic prosperity. Because jurisdictions that have been closer to the bridge have been subject to development pressures, much more. And jurisdictions that haven't had the prosperity, when the first developer comes along, they don't know how to hold the developer's feet to the fire. And you will see this with like the condominium developments along Cambridge Creek. The first one that came along, all they said was, show me the money. And by the time they got to the third or fourth one, they said, actually, we need you to provide public access along the waterfront. Actually, we need you to meet design standards so that this isn't an ugly building. Actually, we need you to do this, that, and the other. And Crisfield went through the same thing with its waterfront redevelopment. After too many years of underinvestment, the first developer to come along seems to have the upper hand. But Talbot County has been in a better position that way, in that we haven't seen that degree. Talbot County had some hard times in the 30s and 40s and even into the 50s. But not to that same degree. And as a consequence, we've I think been in the fortunate position to develop the public will to maintain this vision. It's one of the things that makes this such a special place.
Does either the county or any of the municipalities have the power to require a residential developer to provide certain percentage of affordable housing, which we all know is a need in this county?
So the question is about affordable housing, and can the local jurisdictions require a developer to provide say a percentage of affordable housing? And the answer is that yes, they have the power to do this. The question is whether they have the mechanism and the will to do this. And this is, I believe, a current discussion for the town of Easton, which is to say, when a new development comes along, Easton has had an affordable housing program in the past. It required, for example, Easton Village to provide an offset. And curiously enough, at the time that Easton Village came along, the town's requirement was that 10% of the units must meet the affordability guidelines, and Easton was very clever about providing those. There is a Talbot County Housing Commission that provides subsidized housing. Things like the Doverbrook apartments. There's a couple of units down in St. Michael's that are for those who are at below 80% of the median income for the jurisdiction. And so Easton said, well, there's a program for that income range. But what about the people who are just above? We're finding that people who are in the workforce, and it's typically characterized as teachers and police, for the salaries that we pay for teachers and police, they can't afford, they don't qualify for the subsidized housing, but they still can't afford to build here. And so Easton carved out a program for those who are 80 to 110% of median income. We've got a program for that. They'll take the next increment. And they require 10% of the housing to meet that affordability workforce housing guidelines, 80 to 100% of affordable to those earning 80 to 110% of the median. Well, think about that. That's a moving target, depending on the cost of housing, depending on the mortgage rates. When mortgage rates are down, you can afford more. Mortgage rates go up, you can't afford as much because you're of a purchase price, because you're calculating it not on the purchase price, you're calculating it on the monthly payment. So to circle back, with Easton Village, Easton had a hard and fast requirement that 10% of the units would be priced in this way. And Elm Street, the developer for Easton Village, kicked at that, said, well, this doesn't meet our vision for this, and we've got HOA fees, and they might not be affordable for the people who buy these units. They'll eventually get priced out. And so Elm Street negotiated and got Easton to agree to receive a payment in lieu for each unit. And so Easton created a fund, an affordable housing fund, and gave the oversight of those funds to its affordable housing board to either build new housing that would be in that same affordability range, or to give grants to repair housing, to bring housing up to code that is in that same affordability range. And actually those repair funds have been quite important to Easton. Other places, Elm Street also developed Ashby Commons, which is the area behind the Lowe's. And in that case, 10% of the units were sold to meet the affordability guidelines. So it has been imposed in some cases, but in the most recent one, and most recent development for Easton, which was Estates at Gannon Farm, for whatever reason it wasn't. There is a payment in lieu, I believe $3,000 per unit, but they didn't impose the 10% requirement again. So do jurisdictions have the power to do this? Yes. Do they have the mechanism and the will to do that? That's the bigger question.
Just as a matter of curiosity, when was the first planning done, and who created the vision?
So when was planning first done, and who created the vision? Well, this has been, I think, comprehensive planning, again, goes back about 50 years in Talbot County. And for a lot of the jurisdictions. I think I've seen a 1972 plan for the town of St. Michael's, which I believe might have been the first one for St. Michael's. So we've had comprehensive planning going on for a good half century. And I think that the process by which we do this planning, I think at one point this probably was charged to those professional planners. Come up with something good, and we'll sign off on it. And over time, they've decided that really it may look good to a planner, and it may sound great inside of a university classroom, but it isn't actually what the vision of the population is locally. And so the public process of getting people involved in reviewing this is, I think, something that has grown with each iteration of the comprehensive plan. So that there's a pretty sophisticated process in place now.
So I guess kind of like the founding fathers of the original planning, comprehensive planning, created the vision of the ruralness and the towns being separate by rural areas and that type of thing.
Well, I'll share a funny anecdote with you, in that back in the 1950s, when the county just had its first zoning code, and I don't think we were yet doing comprehensive planning at that point. the Bay Hundred region, the seafood industries were in decline, and the Bay Hundred region, St. Michael's, the Bay Hundred region, were kind of suffering in economic hard times. And an oil company came along and said, we would like to build an oil refinery. And we've got rights to build this on land at Wade's Point, or just south of Claiborne. And the reception it got from was kind of interesting. The folks who lived in Bay Hundred and St. Michael's, actually, there was quite a bit of support for this oil refinery. And because it meant jobs, good paying jobs. And here was going to be a solution to economic malaise in this county. But the people who were in the downwind part of the county were much less enthusiastic about this. And the county council at the time, actually it was county commission back at the time, would not make the zoning change that would have allowed the construction of a refinery in Claiborne. And the folks in Bay Hundred said, well, what are you going to do? And so at that point, the county leader said, we are going to create a lower impact industry to create jobs. We're gonna create tourism. And this was, St. Michael's was a waterman's town with oyster shell streets and hardly a restaurant in sight. And yet from that humble beginning, there was essentially a planning effort to create a tourism industry on that side of the county. You can see the evidence of the success of that to this date. So there has been, from that time, a desire to steer away from that kind of heavy industry and steer toward a vision of more open space and an appreciation of the rural character that, frankly, the tourism industry relies on.
That actually raises a bigger question we probably don't have time for. But is there any brainstorming taking place now as to what industries we want to encourage to come to Talbot County? Health industries, research industries, things that our students can get involved in as well.
So the question is about what is our vision for bringing businesses to the county now, for creating those future jobs. And some of that vision has been focused on technology and to some extent on the medical sector, medical technology sector. And part of the vision for providing that is universal broadband. Universal access to the broadband because now we've just discovered through the experience of the pandemic that if you have a desk job, if you are a White County workforce, you might be able to do part, in some cases, all of your job from your home, provided you have a reliable and fast internet connection. And so that is where I believe our vision is. There's probably a more full answer, but I'll refer you to Cassandra Van, who's our Director of Economic Development and Tourism for that more full answer. But you can get that piece of it from me at any rate.